Spiritual awakening doesn't ignite your purpose. It burns it to ash. What once felt like fire in your chest, ambition, drive, goals dissolves into a silence you can't explain. You were told that enlightenment would make you come alive. That truth would energize you. But now, you're standing in the ruins of everything that used to move you. And it's quiet. Beat to quiet. You're not lazy. Beat, you're not broken. What you're feeling, the fallout of seeing through the illusion. You saw behind the curtain. And now, nothing feels real enough to chase. This isn't failure. It's initiation. You didn't lose your spark. You outgrew the flame. That wasn't yours to begin with. The question isn't how to get your motivation back, it's why it had to disappear in the first place. Softer tone Thoth, Beat the keeper of sacred truth, once said. Beat the silence after awakening is not a void. It's a womb. And what's forming inside you now is something no one taught you to want. Long pause, you spent years moving through life, powered by a flame that was never really yours. It was given to you, handed down like a script, inherited like a mask. From the first gold star in school, to the endless expectations of adulthood, motivation became survival. You chased goals, not because they fed your soul, but because they earned you praise, safety, a seat at the table. You called it drive. You called it discipline. But underneath the hustle was fear. Fear of being left behind, of not being enough, of disappearing into irrelevance. And for a while, it worked. The engine of ego runs loud and fast. It gets things done. It climbs ladders and collects titles. And makes sure you're always busy, always producing, always proving. But when awakening hits, that engine sputters. The structures that once held your identity begin to dissolve. The goals lose meaning. The urgency dies. And the fire beat, the one you thought would keep you going forever, suddenly goes out. Not in some grand explosion, but in a slow, beat, almost imperceptible fade. What you thought was purpose turns out to be performance. And when the stage collapses, so does the actor. That collapse feels like death. Because, in a way, it is. Beat the ego's narrative. The story of who you thought you were, what you were supposed to want, and how you measured your worth begins to unravel. And as it does, so does your motivation. Not because you failed, but because the fuel source was false. You can't keep chasing goals once you see they were invented by a part of you that no longer exists. This is where many seekers panic. The mind screams, I'm losing myself. But Thoth would say, you're not losing yourself, you're shedding what was never truly you. The loss of motivation is not regression. It's resistance to going back to a version of life that was always misaligned. In the silence that follows, something deeper is trying to emerge. But it cannot coexist with the noise of your old identity. Soft intensity, the sacred pause you're in, is not apathy. It is alchemy. You are not done. You are dissolving. And yet, here's what they won't say on the surface. This part of the journey isn't glamorous. It won't trend. There are no shortcuts or affirmations to bypass. Beat, it's not the kind of awakening that makes you feel powerful. It's the kind that humbles you completely. The kind where all you can do is sit in the ash of your former fire and wait for something real to return. Some truths are too deep, beat too raw to fully unpack here. That's why we created the free Insights Academy newsletter. There, we share the knowledge we can't speak on YouTube. And for a limited time, you'll also receive a free copy of the Kabbalion when you sign up at the link in the description. Because the truth is, this stillness you're in isn't the end. It's a reset, a return to origin. The ego ran on adrenaline and applause. But the soul beat, the soul moves differently. It doesn't rush. It doesn't grasp. It waits. It listens. It calls. And in that waiting, it starts to rewire you. Not toward ambition, but toward alignment. You begin to realize, what's coming next won't be about proving anything. It will be about living in integrity with something ancient within you. A truth that doesn't need to shout to be heard. Long pause. No one tells you that after the awakening comes the void. You expected light. Beat, you expected clarity. You expected to finally know what to do with your life. But instead, beat, you wake up into silence. The kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels haunting. Where once there was drive, now, there's nothing but stillness. You can feel your old self crumbling, but there's nothing replacing it yet. You're not who you were, but you're not sure who you're becoming either. You're floating in between stories, and the space in between feels like a loss you can't name. This is the part no one glamorizes. The part that doesn't look like enlightenment, doesn't feel like bliss, beat and doesn't offer answers. It's the aftershock, the moment after the veil lifts, and the world feels suddenly too quiet, too constructed, beat too hollow to take seriously anymore. You see the roles people play, and wonder how you ever played them too. You watch people chase things you used to want. Beat money, beat praise, beat ambition, and instead of envy, beat you feel nothing. Not detachment, but something far stranger, like watching actors on a stage you no longer belong to. And then the questions start to echo. What am I doing? What matters now? Why does everything feel so meaningless? When I thought I had just found the truth. This is the paradox. You expected awakening to set you on fire, but instead, it extinguished everything. You thought knowing would lead to doing, but it leads first to undoing. Thoth calls this the sacred silence. Not emptiness, but a womb. A space that looks barren from the outside, but is full of unseen transformation. The mind will panic. Here, it's been conditioned to interpret stillness as danger. You've been trained to equate movement with worth. No wonder this pause feels like failure. But this is not failure. This is the dismantling of the false architecture. You can't rebuild until the old foundation is cleared. And that clearing, silent, painful, and invisible, is the real work. You may look the same on the outside. You still wear clothes, speak to people, show up in the world. But inside, you're in free fall. And no one around you may even notice. That's part of what makes this so disorienting. You are undergoing a spiritual death in a culture that has no language for it, no rituals, no guidance. Just productivity metrics and self-help slogans that tell you to get back on track. But there is no track anymore. And that's the point in this. In between space, time stretches. You begin to question everything. Not from fear, but from fatigue. You've seen too much to go back and not enough to go forward. You are in the waiting room of your next becoming, and it is sacred, even if it feels unbearable. Thoth reminds us what you're experiencing is not apathy. It is absence. The absence of false motivation, false purpose, and false identity. The system you used to run on is offline. You are not lazy. You are in transition. It's here, in this void, that your senses begin to change. What once excited you now feels loud. What once motivated you now feels hollow. You're not interested in the chase anymore. You're not compelled by performance. You crave something quieter, something real, but you don't know what it is yet. And that's okay. The void is not asking you to figure it out. It's asking you to stop looking for answers in the places that broke. You stay here, breathe here, let yourself grieve the parts of you that no longer fit. You're not being punished. You're being purified. The silence is not mocking you. It's holding you. You haven't lost your way. You've simply stepped off the map. And soon, something will begin to stir in that darkness. Not a command, not a vision board, but a pulse. And that pulse will not demand. It will invite. When it does, you'll know the difference. You were taught that ambition was holy, that the ones who woke up earliest, worked the hardest, sacrificed the most. Those were the ones who deserved to succeed. You learned to equate exhaustion with dedication, and burnout with bravery. Somewhere along the way, stillness became suspect. Rest looked like laziness. Slowness was weakness. And any moment not filled with progress was a moment wasted. You didn't just inherit this mindset, you absorbed it. It became part of your reflexes. The invisible metrics by which you judged your own worth. Are you producing? Are you improving? Are you doing enough? Now, after awakening, those metrics begin to dissolve. You feel no urgency, no spark, no clear goal. And the deeper fear creeps in. Not that something's wrong with the world, but that something's wrong with you. If motivation is gone, you assume you're broken, that you failed your own awakening. But this is where the deception runs deep. The drive you once had wasn't born from your soul. It was programmed into your psyche, a feedback loop built by systems that need you to strive, need you to perform, need you to forget what it means to simply be. Thoth teaches that what we call ambition is often the echo of unhealed fear. The drive to achieve is, for many, a compensation for the terror of stillness. To stop is to feel. To slow down is to hear the silence. And in that silence lies everything society teaches us to avoid: grief, emptiness, existential unease. So instead, we stay busy, constantly chasing something in the hope that it will drown out quiet ache we never learned to face. But awakening brings that ache to the surface. It strips the noise, the roles, the scripts, and suddenly you are standing in a silence you can't outsource, medicate, or outrun. In that silence, drive begins to look strange, not noble, not empowering, just noisy. You begin to see that much of what you once called purpose was actually pressure, internalized performance. Thoth calls this the sacred reversal in anti-adromia, when something taken to its extreme becomes its opposite. Drive becomes inertia, hustle becomes stillness. The fire burns out, not from failure, but from overuse, from futility. This reversal is not a malfunction, it's a recalibration. The soul cannot speak in the same volume as the ego. It doesn't shout, it hums. It moves differently, not through deadlines and dopamine hits, but through resonance. When you're in alignment, the soul doesn't need motivation, it needs meaning. And meaning, like achievement, doesn't always come with applause. Often, it comes in whispers, in quiet acts that go unseen, in moments that feel small but ring true. So if you've lost your drive, ask yourself, what was driving you before? Was it love, or fear, alignment, or performance, truth, or illusion, approval? Don't rush to replace the old fire. Don't run to light a new one. Let the ashes settle. Let the dust clear. Because underneath that burned out engine is something waiting to emerge. Not as a sprint, but as a steady, sacred movement. You will feel compelled to get back on track. You will crave your old urgency, mistake it for energy. But Thoth reminds us, the old track was a treadmill, and the urgency was an addiction. What comes next is not about doing more. It's about doing differently, from a place of stillness, from a place of truth. There's a moment, just after the unraveling begins, when the world doesn't look quite real anymore. You walk through familiar places, speak familiar words, but none of it fits. Like wearing someone else's clothes, or watching yourself from a distance. It's subtle at first, a disconnection, a weightlessness, but then it deepens. You no longer recognize your own desires. The things that used to pull you forward now leave you unmoved, and yet nothing new has arrived to take their place. That's when the descent begins, not into chaos but into quiet, not into madness but into soul. This is the space Thoth calls the holy dark, a descent not into failure but into the underworld of the psyche, where the ego unravels and nothing familiar survives. And it must be this way. You can't carry the old scaffolding into the new foundation. The persona, the carefully crafted identity you were for the world, has to die before the self can rise. But death, even symbolic, rarely feels like freedom. It feels like collapse. This isn't depression in the clinical sense, though it may echo its symptoms. This is something older, something sacred. Depression numbs, detaches. This descent awakens something raw. You're not checked out, you're too aware, painfully aware, aware of how much of your life was built on avoidance, aware of the scripts you performed to be accepted, aware of the dreams you inherited, not chose. And now, stripped of distraction, you are face to face with what's underneath it all: silence. And not the kind that soothes, the kind that confronts. Our culture has no patience for this stage. It medicates, it pathologizes, it labels it as dysfunction. But Thoth would say, this descent is not a breakdown, it's an initiation, a dismantling of what was never real, so that what is real can begin to form. The ego collapses loudly, the soul emerges quietly. You won't find it by forcing clarity, you'll find it by surrendering to not knowing. This is where time slows, days blend, Energy comes in waves, or not at all. Your old self, the one that could push through, hustle harder, grind without stopping, that self is gone. And in its absence, you feel exposed, vulnerable, like a seed in the soil broken open before roots have taken hold. You want to grow, you want direction, but nothing responds. That's the test. Can you stay in the soil long enough to trust that growth is happening in when you see no proof? The descent into Soul isn't poetic when you're in it. It's gritty, it's quiet, it's terrifying. It strips you of external validation, and in that nakedness, it forces you to ask, who am I, without performance, without praise, without purpose? And the only answer that comes is a whisper, wait, wait, not as in passive, but as in sacred stillness. Stillness as a space where truth begins to reassemble itself. In this descent, you don't find answers. You become the question. Every layer that falls away reveals another lie you once lived. Every silence hides a doorway, and yet no map will guide you through this. Only trust, not in outcomes but in the process. Thoth teaches that this stage is not a punishment for awakening. It's the price of becoming whole. You can't bypass it. You can't fast forward through it. You can only descend. And the deeper you go, the more space you create for something true to rise. This is the part where nothing happens, or at least, that's how it feels. No great revelations. No divine downloads. Just silence. Long stretches of quiet uncertainty, and stillness that seem to stretch on without end. After the descent into soul, after the collapse of old identity, there is no immediate resurrection, no swift rise from the ashes. There is only this, the pause. And it is maddening because you've been trained to associate value with motion, progress, evidence. But now you are living in the chrysalis, and the chrysalis does not perform. Everything in you may scream to escape it, to go back to doing, planning, achieving, anything to outrun this inertia. But the soul works on a different clock, one not bound by urgent sire outcome. It demands incubation, not acceleration. You are not malfunctioning. You are not failing. You are transforming in a way that is invisibly in the surface, but monumental beneath it. Thoth reminds us that the caterpillar does not become a butterfly by adding wings. It dissolves. It becomes unrecognizable before it becomes whole. The chrysalis, it is no longer what it was, and not yet what it will be. It is goo, formless, undefined. That's you right now, and that's why everything feels so strange, so empty, so out of sync. You've shed the old structure, but the new form has not yet emerged. You are becoming even as you feel like you're disappearing. This space is sacred, but it does not feel safe. Because you have no script to follow here, no model to emulate. The world outside continues to spin with goals, deadlines, and highlight reels while you are asked to wait, to stay soft, to stay silent, to stay surrendered. And that is a kind of courage few will ever understand. The kind of courage that doesn't look like battle, but stillness. Not because you're avoiding the world, but because you're learning to meet it from a place that's real. You may feel pressure to explain yourself, to justify this season to others, to make it seem like you're still productive, still improving. But the soul does not justify itself. It does not compete for validation. It knows that this quiet season is not a pause in your life. It is the foundation of your real one. You are not behind. You are beneath. Beneath the surface. Beneath the noise. Beneath the illusion. And down here, something ancient is rooting itself within you. It won't announce itself with clarity or confidence. It won't come in the language of goals or plans. It will come as a pull, a quiet knowing, a subtle but steady hum in your chest that says, not this, but something else. And when it comes, it won't ask you to return to who you were. It will invite you to rise as someone you've never been. But not yet. The wait is not over. You cannot rush what must unfold in darkness. You cannot force what must grow slowly. Trust is the only map here. Not blind faith, but a deeper trust. The kind that comes from recognizing that life is not punishing you. It is preparing you. That nothing is missing. That your soul is still speaking Jevon if it's only in silence. Thoth teaches that real transformation is not loud. It is not theatrical. It is not designed for display. It happens in the unseen, the undefined, the deeply personal space where no one is watching, and no one is clapping. So if you're here, suspended in the in-between, feeling unmotivated, uninspired, and unclear, know this: you are exactly where you need to be. You are not stuck. You are cocooned. When the shift begins, it doesn't come with fireworks. It doesn't come with clarity, a plan, or a rush of energy that tells you you're finally back. It arrives like a whisper, a soft inner tug, a faint pulse that doesn't push but gently pulls. After so much silence, it's easy to miss it. You've grown used to the stillness. You've stopped looking for direction because direction stopped avenging the ways it used to. But now, something stirs. Not loud, not obvious, but undeniable. You might not even recognize it as movement at first. It doesn't feel like motivation. It doesn't feel like drive. It feels like resonance, like a truth humming just beneath the surface, asking not for speed, but for sincerity. There's no urgency in it, no pressure to make up for lost time, just a quiet knowing that it's time to begin again. But this time from somewhere entirely different. Thoth calls this the sacred return. Not a return to the old, but a return to self. The youth that was buried beneath years of conditioning, roles, and expectations. That self doesn't need a mission statement. It doesn't need to be validated or applauded. It only needs to be honored. And you honor it, not by forcing clarity, but by following that subtle inner pull toward the things that feel real, simple, and alive. This new movement won't feel like what you knew before. It won't be fueled by fear or the desire to prove yourself. You won't be chasing success or checking boxes. You'll be responding, listening, following threads of energy that make no sense to the ego, but feel completely right to your soul. And this is where many people get confused. Because from the outside looks like you're doing less. You may even look like you've stepped away from the world. But inside, everything is beginning again. You're not working harder. You're working truer. You're not speaking louder. You're speaking cleaner. You're not trying to be someone. You're allowing yourself to simply be. And in that being, creation returns. Not as a demand, but as a desire. A natural urge to express what you now know in your bones. Not just your mind. To move because it would feel like betrayal not to. To act not because you're told to, but because something inside is finally ready. This is the real return of motivation. Not the borrowed, performative kind, but the soul-born kind. It's quiet. It's rooted. And it doesn't burn out because it's not trying to be seen. It's not a show. It's not a comeback. It's a continuation of something ancient that has been waiting for space within you. You may find yourself creating again. Writing, speaking, building, helping, not because you must, but because you can't not. The self does not strive. It flows. And when you act from this place, your energy no longer leaks. It replenishes. You're not drained by what you do. You're nourished by it. You're not chasing alignment, you're becoming it. Rebirth, as Thoth reminds us, is not a blaze. It is a candle lit in the dark. It is subtle, sacred, and entirely sovereign. It will not demand your attention. It will wait for your consent. And when you offer it, everything begins to move again. Not from pressure, but from peace. The old fire was dramatic. It flared when you were praised, surged when you felt threatened, dimmed when you weren't validated. It was a fire of reaction, a flame that fed on recognition, ambition, anxiety. It burned fast, and it burned you out. You mistook it for purpose, Abekis. It kept you moving. But in hindsight, it was unstable, flickering with every gust of approval or disappointment. When awakening took that fire from you, it felt like death. But what you're beginning to realize now is that it made space for a flame that cannot be extinguished because it doesn't come from the world. It comes from within. This new fire is quieter. It doesn't rise with applause or shrink under pressure. It lives deeper beyond thought, beyond mood, beyond the games of self-worth. It doesn't ask, what do I need to do to be enough? It asks, what is real in me now? And the answer isn't loud. It's steady. It's calm. It doesn't shout to be noticed, because it doesn't need to be. It simply burns gently, constantly, unapologetically. This is the beginning of living from essence instead of effort. You're no longer performing to be seen. You're expressing because you've remembered who you are. That remembrance didn't always bring clarity in the form of goals or 5-year plans. Sometimes, it just changes how you show up. The way you speak, the way you listen, the way you exist in the world. Even when no one is watching, there is no longer a need to hustle for meaning. You don't need to find your purpose like it's some hidden object buried beneath years of failure. You begin to understand that purpose isn't something you chase, it's something you become. And it unfolds naturally when you live from that steady internal flame. Thoth teaches that true power is not loud or forceful. It is an unshakable presence, a rootedness that can't be touched by trends or metrics or external validation. A devotion to what is true, even when it makes no sense to anyone else. You may start doing things that seem small. Reading differently, creating without an audience, walking without a destination, speaking from stillness. These aren't symptoms of apathy. They are signs of return. Return to self. Return to rhythm. Return to the inner intelligence that never needed fixing. Only space to breathe. And yes, people might not understand this new version of you. They may miss your drive, your fire, your ambition. But that's only because they haven't seen what comes after awakening. The version of youth that moves from wholeness, not hunger. That builds not to prove, but to honor. That rests not because it's earned, but because it's natural. You're no longer living a life of reaction. You're living a life of resonance. And that resonance will guide you toward what's truly yours. It won't always be obvious, and it won't always be easy, but it will always feel aligned. It will always feel like home. Thoth reminds us that the flame of the soul is not for show. It is for truth. It's not meant to light a stage. It's meant to light the path within. You are no longer trying to impress the world. You are listening to the world inside you. And in that shift, everything begins to change. Something subtle happens when you begin living from the self. Life no longer feels like a stage you must perform on or a ladder you were supposed to climb. It starts to feel like a rhythm. An unfolding, not a test, not a task, just a deepening movement, unique to you, steady and strange. You stop asking, what should I be doing, and start listening for what feels quietly true. The self doesn't rush, it doesn't demand, it doesn't shout over the noise of the world, it waits, and when you finally give it space, it speaks, not in commands but in pulses, gentle pulls. Sacred nudges. The kind of inner knowing you can't explain, but you also can't ignore. You may find your days changing, not in ways that look dramatic, but in ways that feel honest. You're not waking up with anxiety anymore. You're not forcing plans that no longer resonate. You're not saying yes to things that stretch you thin. Your life begins to reorient not around productivity, but around presence. Around what feels alive. Around what resonates in your chest instead of what makes sense on paper. This is not about becoming someone new. This is about finally allowing who you've always been to lead. It's not easy because the world will still try to pull you back into the old pace, into the noise, the urgency, the pressure to prove. But something in you has changed. You can feel when you're out of alignment now, not in theory, but in your body, in your nervous system, in your breath. Misalignment feels like static. Resonance feels like peace. And slow, holy. You start choosing peace more often, not as an escape, but as a compass. Thoth teaches that the self is not found through striving, but through stripping away. It does not appear as a goal achieved, but as a presence remembered. It was always there, underneath the layers of ego, conditioning, and cultural noise. And now, in the quiet that followed your awakening, it has space to breathe, space to guide, space to pulse through your life like a current, drawing you not toward achievement, but toward authenticity. You are not interested in chasing anymore. You're interested in cultivating, in building slowly, in doing things that take root. You understand that real creation doesn't come from adrenaline. It comes from alignment. And alignment isn't glamorous. It doesn't always look like success. But it feels like integrity. It feels like home. This is where the return begins. Not to the old world, but to a deeper kind of participation. One where you no longer ask for permission to be who you are. One where your inner authority speaks louder than the world's expectations. You are not trying to fit in anymore. You are finally letting life fit around what is real in you. And in that shift, the self doesn't just awaken, it begins to lead. There comes a point in the journey when the stillness you once feared becomes the very thing that anchors you. It no longer feels like waiting. It feels like being, not passive, not aimless, but rooted, present, honest. The fire that once drove you is frantic and erratic, built on scarcity and urgency. But what you carry now is different. It doesn't flare, it glows. Constant, humble, unshakable. And you realize something you never could have seen before. The stillness was never a void. It was the threshold off your real life beginning. You no longer move because you're trying to catch up. You move because something within you is in motion. And you're finally in sync with it. This movement isn't driven by guilt or timeliness or some invisible scoreboard. It's pulled by meaning. And meaning, you've discovered, doesn't live in the future. It lives in how you show up now. In the quality of your attention, in the sincerity of your yes, in the courage of your no. You've stopped chasing the version of yourself you were told to become. You've stopped asking what the world needs from you and started asking what truth needs to come through you. The difference is subtle, but everything changed when you live from that place. The world may still demand your hustle, your output, your participation in the race, but you've stepped off the track. Not in defiance, but in devotion. You're not trying to escape life. You're trying to meet it with your soul intact. You begin to feel a deeper intelligence moving through your choices. Not rational, not linear, but unmistakable. You walk away from things that no longer match your frequency, even if they once thrilled you. You stop justifying your need for space, for silence, for softness. You begin to live as if your inner world matters more than the world's reaction to it. And in doing so, something extraordinary happens. You feel free. Not loud, revolutionary, billboard-style freedom. Quiet, sovereign, embodied freedom. The kind that doesn't need to declare itself to be real. The kind that allows you to live lightly, to create slowly, to speak gently. You don't need to convince anyone. You don't need to be understood. The truth you carry now doesn't need defending. It just needs living. And that is the paradox of awakening. You thought it would make you more. Instead, it made you less. But only less of what was never really you. What remains is the part of youth that can't be shaken, can't be sold, can't be lost. It is steady, sacred, and profoundly yours. And from this place, motivation becomes irrelevant. What replaces itis resonance? Alignment, integrity, not as lofty ideals, but as the invisible architecture of your every action. Your life is no longer a performance. It's a prayer, a quiet offering to something deeper than desire. The soul doesn't hustle, it harmonizes. And now so do you. If you've reached this point and still think motivation is missing, again, what you've lost is the noise. What you've gained is a signal, the one you were always meant to follow. Not because it's loud, but because it's true. And if you felt the truth in these words, don't let the signal fade. Join Insights Academia through the link in the description, where we go deeper into what can't be said here. And yes, you'll receive the Kabbalion ebook for free. But more than that, you'll step into a space built for real seekers. Don't miss it. If this video resonated with you, let us know by commenting. Understood it.